In this episode of Investors and Operators, I sit down with Jay Jester, partner at Plexus Capital, a North Carolina-based lower middle market private equity firm. Jay, it is awesome to have you on here. Love to kick off with maybe a snapshot about what Plexus is.
Simplest version, like we're the small deal guys. This is a firm that's been around for 15 years. Deals all over the country, certainly in the environment we're in today. Love stuff that we can drive to, and love the fact that, sort of ACC and SEC country down here is just an awesome, really big market, bunch of great entrepreneurs. But, think of us as, if you have a deal with 2 to 12 of EBITDA, we would love to talk to you about it. And that can be minority equity, debt, control equity, all the above. We do a ton of work with independent sponsors who are coming to us looking for both debt and additional equity in structuring these small deals. And, after 20 years with Audax Private Equity in Boston, it was a chance for me to come home to North Carolina, which is where I'm originally from, but also come home to the small deal market, where I believe there's 250,000 companies in the United States in this zone, and 25 to 50,000 deals a year that happen in this ecosystem. And really excited to be investing in this part of the market again.
That's awesome. I really want to dive into what types of deals you do, and specifically with independent sponsors, because I think that you guys are one of the leaders that independent sponsors are speaking to. With the first couple of years with Debt Maven, with my other business, like, we showed you guys a ton of deals and always thoughtful feedback on them. But let's rewind a little bit, and actually maybe to get the gears turning a little bit, let's do some flash questions, a little lightning round here. So we're going to start off with some questions like, number one, if you had a walkout song, theme music, what would that be?
A walkout song. I like this. It's funny. I don't listen to a lot of music. I'm a book on tape guy, and whether I'm running or rowing.
So what is your audible walkout book?
Well, no, I have some music, but it's a pretty narrow playlist. My kids help me out with. They keep the music on around the house, but I'm gonna have to go with The Curve by the Avett Brothers.
There we go.
And I've actually just watching that. There's a great documentary on those guys that just came out. But I think that's a great lyrics, great tune, and if I had to pick a go-to band, it's probably those guys these days.
Done. Next, childhood hero.
The easiest question anybody ever asked me. It's got to be my dad. Marine, ran a small business, best husband in the world, best dad in the world, and brought me into his small business from the time I could form sentences. Really cool to see him very transparently share about the challenges of a small business, and number one hero.
Okay, let's talk more about that, because I have a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old, and my wife and I are partners in our business. So we're going down that journey together. And was it like from the very beginning, all throughout, high school and college, he ran a small business? Like, what was that exposure? Like, what was it like just kind of being around a family business?
So my mom worked in the business as well. My grandfather, who was actually a tanker in the Philippines in World War II, came back and started, it's basically an advertising specialty distributorship. And he and my grandmother were in it. My dad came in it. My uncle came in it. He was a Marine pilot. It was just the ultimate family small business, and it was our topic of conversation.
Again, advertising specialty distributor,
promotional products distributor, mostly for college bookstores and alumni associations, donor recognition items, all kinds of stuff like that. It was what we talked about around the table, and as they looked at getting into new products and new ideas. When we would take a spring break, we would jump in the station wagon and drive up the East Coast. I remember one year we set sort of Niagara Falls as the turnaround point and we drove up the East Coast, stopping off to see a bunch of his suppliers and customers. And I'm a guy who I've been on 1,000 plant tours in my life, and the first one was touring one of my dad's suppliers as an 11-year-old kid. And as I got a little bit older, he would take me to dinner with his big clients. I remember Mincer's, which is an awesome, one of the great college bookstores in the country in Charlottesville, Virginia, that Mark Mincer and his father ran, was one of my dad's favorite customers. And Dad would take me in there and show me about merchandising and how the revenue per square foot that these guys were able to generate. And if you ever get to Charlottesville, go see this store. It's unbelievable.
That's really interesting, because one of the things my wife and I have been talking about is how do you integrate the family business with the family, and to what extent should you? And then I'm starting to realize just like we don't want to keep it separated, because it's who we are. What gives us enjoyment, fulfillment in life, and finding ways to teach our kids about money. Or, hey, you want to go buy that croissant at Starbucks? No, Daddy's not going to pay for that. Okay, 4-year-old, go figure it out. Go make something and go sell it to somebody who'll have pity on you on the street.
Yeah. I mean, without a doubt, one of the most important things you can teach a child is the value of a dollar. And there's 1,000 different ways to do that right, and there's 10,000 ways to do that wrong. And I think, I just finished reading the book about, what's it called? Coming Apart, about the super zips and the affluence that has come out of the last couple decades. And I think it's an area where, particularly in big cities and nice neighborhoods, where people have failed to teach a kid what it means to earn a dollar and to appreciate a dollar. And I think a great way to do it is through sharing, the trials and tribulations of a family business and what it means. That, yeah, we want to hire people and we want to pay them more, every one of them, but we have to make the right decision for the business. And you got to figure out age appropriate ways to do it. But I think it's a super important skill set and mindset.
It's interesting because, every day we go out with the family and work out, and we want the 4-year-olds, like now she's doing like the burpees, the push-ups, and then she wants to get the croissant or whatever it is at, the cafe afterwards. But then how do you tie the incentive? Like, if you do this, then you get money, then you can buy that. Because I don't want to have that incentive structure of, if you exercise, then you get money, then you can buy a croissant. But I'm trying to figure out, like, how do you build that incentive system? But this might be like a whole nother, this is a part 2 vlog on the Jester family lessons.
And you can, it's interesting to use the workout, because it's not unlike what I do with myself every day. Is like, yeah, I want to eat that. I want to eat those 2 donuts. And if I translate that into burpees, I don't want to eat those 2 donuts that bad. Because it's, donuts good, but it ain't worth, 120 burpees.
That's a good point, and it makes you think about habit change. Yeah. And so what do you think are some of the best habits that you have formed, maybe either recently or kept throughout your life, and how those habits have just stayed in place, either, personally, and how it also relates to, your day-to-day in BD?
Yeah, this ties into a couple of the questions that you had asked. One of them, what would I go back and say to my 21-year-old self, or my new self, and my young self in just in the BD role? And I would say a big part of that is figuring out or translating the cost of things. And I would, one of the habits that I've developed fairly recently is I am opening Excel for everything. And by that I mean, every time you hire a bank to sell a company, if you are starting over on that fee negotiation, just based on the 4 banks you talked to about that one deal, you are way behind the curve. you need to collect that data and understand that data and how that data has changed and how it's different in hot markets and cold markets. It's all right in front of you. And the discipline and the habit is write it down and save it and categorize it and make it actionable so that you can rely on that data the next time you need it. Understanding that you're going to look at 1,000 deals a year, you're going to try to visit 80 to 100 of those to close 8 to 10 of those. Whatever the cycle is, that's really important. Understanding how many deals a deal source is going to bring you each year is really important. Turn it around and understand the economics of the deal source. Is the guy who's selling you that company, how many deals is he going to sell in a year? And that was a huge epiphany for me about a decade ago, was to realize, yeah, at Audax, we were going to do 10 to 12 platforms a year and 100 add-on acquisitions. The guy that I'm talking to is trying to close 3 deals in 2014. That is a misalignment that you don't understand unless you really dig in and walk a little bit in the other guy's shoes and understand the math of his world.
So do you think, can you state the point again? Because I think you made a lot in there, but is the key point that it's getting more granular and writing down at a deeper level? Sorry, I'm misstating your point.
Nope. And I put a lot of points into one answer, so I'll try to shorten that up. I told you, I warned you about this. The habit, the really important habit, is to dive deep in the data. And even though it may not present itself to you as data in a nicely organized spreadsheet, take all the answers and all the nuances of the business that you can put in Excel and study it. Try to understand the math of the banker on the other side of the negotiation. Understand and take the time to write down and understand the economics of a fee negotiation and track it. And I would say that is one of the most important habits for me, is because in BD, you span such a, over the course of a year, you'll touch so many different things that I think it's important to step back and pull the data out of that year of activities so that you make better decisions.
On the same topic of BD, what advice do you have for BD professionals who are kind of just getting started? And, what are some of the best BD interview questions either that you like to ask or that they have asked you?
So I hit the second part of that first. The questions that I like to ask, I love to ask people how they organize themselves. What is your system for tracking all the things that you need to do? Have you got what is your digital assistant to-do tracker? Are you a notebook guy? Are you somebody who's got an app? How do you think about organizing your day? Because I think that is one of the environmental risks of BD, is you can get dragged 1,000 miles wide and an inch deep, and you have to be really disciplined in organizing yourself. So I love to hear how somebody does that.
How do you do it? How have, in your decades of doing this, like, what is your system now?
It is constantly evolving. There are a bunch of digital assistants, and I love the fact that they've translated from a Microsoft tablet to an iPad to an iPhone. The current system I really like is OneNote, and how that ties in. And I would say OneNote tied in with SharePoint is really useful. The mentality of late is to start each day looking at that massive list left over from yesterday and just say, what are the 3 things that I got to do today? And there's a couple of different, I think it's Warren Buffett that really talked about the importance of what are the three big things that need to be accomplished, especially if you get more senior, and just focusing in on those. As opposed to, it's not about nobody's trying to get 20 things done. It's three things. And when you get them done, you can take them back.
This is really, really helpful. Like, how do you structure your day or your week? For example, do you time block certain parts of the day or the week?
And it's another book. I think it's, I'll make it the author on it. It's
Deep Work.
Pink. The book's called When. And just talks about, understanding, and it's been something in COVID. I feel like I've gone through an eating phase, a workout phase, and now a sleep phase. And realizing how critical sleep is, and not traveling as much. You really appreciate it's easier to see the impact of a really good night's sleep on all of those things, when you're not on airplanes all the time and moving around and, grabbing a nap on a flight, and trying to tie in the different parts of the day and how your brain is functioning with the activity. So for example, I think for me, the most difficult part of the day is probably 1:30 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. That is the lowest energy. And there's a lot of data that would support that a lot of mistakes, a disproportionate amount of mistakes get made in that time zone. So that's the time of day when I am, I might even take a long walk, take my iPhone, catch up on a bunch of calls when I can walk and talk. And that activity really helps.
What's the name of the book? It's called WAVE, Wave.
Sorry, When. WAPN.
Daniel Pink, the scientific secrets of perfect timing.
Yeah. It's like, I thought it was a terrific, big concept book. Everybody's a little bit different on that. But I thought that was a really interesting one. Reading investment memos, really difficult decisions. As an organization, we are pushing those decisions earlier in the day. And when you're fresh, everybody's caffeinated, everybody's had a good night's sleep. That's when, the high stakes, deal pricing, difficult decisions and difficult conversations are, trying to tie those into the right time of day for that.
Yep.
So I think
things like quick emails, do you have a 1 hour time block in the day when this is that part of your 1:30 to 4 o'clock time block when you're just kind of rapid fire for an hour or so? Or how do you think about those other blocks?
That is a great question. For me, that is usually after dinner. I've been really trying hard to be present, for the Zoom meetings, not multitasking. I can slip into some bad ADD habits and, watch the phone ring during a discussion and try to multitask and to try to turn all that stuff off, like you and I both did at the beginning of this, to really be present and focused on one thing at a time, and then save the emails and the voicemails for the end of the day.
So you'll have a time block after dinner to kind of go through everything that's not, do you turn off your email? Do you turn off, for example, there's this book called Deep Work, and that really showed me that for certain periods, I have to turn off my phone. I have to turn off Slack. I have to turn off email, which is like, I'm horrible at this, but that's one of the things I have to do. And it's like go into the zone for 90 minutes because of that transition time between tasks and the residue from the previous task to the next one. I realize I'm not actually getting deep quality work done.
Well, so here's a life hack for that is just get old. And one of the things, like I talked about walking, and I've gotten where I need longer arms, and so walking with just my iPhone, it gives me such a headache to try to read email and keep up with text that I can just walk and talk, and I'm not at risk. And so that's one of the nice things about, in the 50 plus category is it's not like I'm on a Peloton bike trying to also read email.
Yeah, some might think.
Yeah, effectively, I'm turning that off. And I'll tell you the other thing that has helped me is removing. And I don't want to malign anybody else's product, but the really intentionally addictive social media platforms, just removing those from my phone. I've got them on my iPad. Every once in a while, it's nice to check in and see what your friends are doing, especially in this kind of environment. But just getting those off of the phone and out of reach is helpful.
Yeah.
And I've spent more time thinking about my phone as, really text, voice, and Zoom. Connecting one-on-one with people is a more useful deployment of the phone than.
Do you have notifications on your email on your phone, or have you turned those off?
I've turned those off, and I've also turned them off on. I have a we call it an iWatch.
Yeah.
And again,
no, this is good. I'm glad we're going down this rabbit hole. This is like super tactical, but I think that this is important to the larger topic of how to be a high performer in business development or whatever pursuit, because all of these things take away, all of these distractions take away from our greatness in a particular project or career path. And I think it was Brendan Burchard who said something to that effect, like, distractions take away from your greatness. But maybe
I frame it in like, what are the things that only I can do today? And again, as a partner in the firm, that is an easier luxury than somebody starting out new. But backing up a little bit and saying, am I just chipping in out of my insecurity to get a class participation grade? And as an institution at Plexus, we spend a lot of time, we call it the RACY matrix. Who's responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted, and who's informed. And try to remember where you are in those 4 categories.
Can you say those again?
So it's RACY, RACI.
Okay.
Are you responsible for it? Are you accountable for it? Are you consulted on the decision? Are you simply informed of what's going on? And we organize ourselves around that framework. And the stuff where I'm an R or an A is really important. And are you the doer? Or are you the guy who's next on the line? And then there's a whole bunch of other things where people will come and say, wow, Jay, there are 3 banks we're considering hiring. Do you have any thoughts on that? And then there's other stuff, somebody says, hey, we are hiring this bank, just wanted to let you know. And so you can know what the institutional expectation is of you as a business leader in those decisions. And by pre-establishing that, I think you save a lot of time, because you sort of laid out who's responsible for what ahead of time, and I think it's an important way to think about how how you organize your day as well. That's
really interesting, because I've been struggling with that in the past year in particular, as we start to have full-time team members and go from the freelancer small business to building a team. And the framework I'm currently using, I just thought about this, was like DADE, which is like, okay, I'm going to either dominate it, means like I'm doing it, or I'm going to automate it. For example, use X.AI to automate the responses for scheduling, or I'm going to delegate it, or I'm going to deprioritize it, or I'm going to eliminate it. But and I've been trying to think through my day and using that framework to say, like, do I really need to do that task? Or do I need to spend the time training the team to do that? Because that's like, in order for this business to actually grow, our goal is to get from, for a 4-person full-time team. Now we want to get to 10, and we'll probably steady state, or target state is like probably 25 people. But I have to establish that managerial framework, which I'm not good at. Just so I'm wondering, like, what have you found good to manage your team as you growing as a manager?
Yeah, well, and I would say that the RACY is really, it's a really useful way to think about things. And as you're doing your prep work for a meeting, go back and say, what did we pre-agree my input would be on this? I'm there to answer a question and provide some context and perspective. Or am I actually the person who's responsible for this outcome? and you participate in a meeting or a decision in a very different fashion based on that. But go back, yours was DADE. I got dominate, automate, delegate, eliminate.
Dominate, automate, delegate, deprioritize, eliminate. And deprioritize can be like, it's important, but not right now. And I'm horrible at that because I think everything's important right now.
Yep.
And one of the things I also noticed is that the dopamine hit or whatever it is that comes from doing 10 small things feels really good. And it feels like you get momentum. And I would use that in the morning as opposed to doing deep work first, like let's say a proposal that might take 1 or 2 hours of deep thought. But what I realized is like, I need to get that first because that's actually the most important thing. Those are your rocks instead of the pebbles. And then I was like, well, how do I get my energy up in the morning so I am focused and I have solid energy? And then I realized like, oh, it's called exercise. So for the past 9 months. But the other thing that gives me a lot of energy are meetings or doing like interviews like this. The downside of the meetings or the interviews is that then my brain goes into freaking creative mode and I'll think of 20 things as opposed to the most important thing that needs to get done that day.
Right.
I think that's now now we have a third episode that we got to talk about. This is great. This is just an episode talking about future episodes. We'll have the Jester series. But you know, when you look back on the thread of business development, you know, so let's kind of clarify, what advice is that for BD professionals who are just getting started?
Sorry, in which category though?
General. I'm a newbie. I just started at a fund. I am the, new person on the BD team. I'll call it a 3-person BD team or number 2. Like, what is your advice to me so that I can absolutely crush it in this first year or 2?
Master your habits and really be intentional about where you're going to deploy your time and where you're going to move the needle for the organization. If you've been brought into the BD role with the mindset of, like, the best mindset to bring in a new BD person is, you are our eyes and ears and historian for this firm. Like, go out there and help our firm build a great relationship with the other firms that matter to us. I think that's the positive way to set it up. And that means that you have to organize the team to build great relationships that will be profitable for your firm. The bad way to launch BD is like, hey, we know all our most important people. You go off on your own and try to turf up some marginal stuff that we didn't think of. Like, I would say, if that's the mandate someone's giving you, then what you should say is, I quit. And go find a firm that says to you, we need you to bring it all together, to organize it. And you'd asked a question about, what's a great example? And I was a non-business training area for this kind of leadership. And I was talking to my youngest child, is my daughter. She's 20, and in high school she became a crew coxswain. And I wrote a little bit growing up, and in the new boats, the coxswain's in the front and back to back with the 4 rowers. And so she's steering. She's got visibility forward. The only thing she can't see is the engine room, is what's going on. And I think that is the greatest metaphor, because she has to be looking out at the body of water, at the course, at the competition. She has to be communicating to the engine room what's going on, where we're going. She has to be able to feel, who's struggling, who needs a word of encouragement without looking at them. And I think that's the BD role, is you are a lot of times alone, the only one looking the direction that you're looking. There's a bunch of other people that are, they're focused on each other. They're focused on these project goals. They can see what the other rowers are doing. They can see the blades. And and you got to figure out how to feel your organization, the strengths and weaknesses, and win the race. And to me, that, you know, all of those skill sets, and that means that in practice, and you got to study, and you got to watch other boats, and you got to see the mechanics of the system that you might not get to be in the weeds of every day.
Let's unpackage that earlier point on how it shouldn't be, hey, I'm the head of BD, I'm going to focus on these tier 1, tier 2s, you focus on everyone else. Because that it does seem like a logical approach in terms of I'm going to focus on the most important relationships because I've known them, they know me, they know the firm. But there are all these other bankers that would be considered like tier 2, tier 3 that could have deals, but we just don't talk to them. And so why is that particular strategy not work? Or maybe I'm not understanding the point or the motivation behind, or the point you're making on the question.
And I guess what I would say is a typical, particularly an upper mid-market private equity firm, the universe gets pretty small. You know, I think there may be, depending on the size of your fund and your sector focus, there are probably 10 to 100 deal sources that actually matter. And there will be some really important ones at the top of your funnel that have shown you hundreds of deals. You've closed dozens of deals. You've sold through that firm multiple times. And to me, involving your BD, your very best BD person in helping optimize those relationships is the best use of that marginal hour. And I'll give an example. Let's say there's a great, you're a healthcare focused firm, or you're a firm that has healthcare and industrials. And your healthcare team has really connected with this one investment bank and one investment banker who's the healthcare specialist in this large firm. And there's just great trust there. At the margin, you are better off leveraging that trust and that history and all the fees that have been paid back and forth to then expand into the other parts of that investment bank than to try to go start from scratch and build a brand new relationship.
So the number 2, number 3, those resources, a majority of those resources should be spent on those top relationships to go deeper into them. Is that the?
I think there's part of that. And I think it's also acknowledging that a deal professional, and it goes back to my earlier point of, you know, figuring out each participant's economics. But a deal guy who's trying to close 1 or 2 new platform deals a year and then optimize and create equity value in those deals, he's not thinking, and let's say the healthcare guy, he's not thinking like, wow, I really need to make sure that we see all the industrial flow from this same firm. He's just thinking, I want to see more healthcare deals. He's not incented to branch out and think about that. The BD person should be in the seat, able to say like, wow, Lincoln International, they have, we just mind meld with them on healthcare. And we know the leaders of the firm, they trust us. They trust our valuations. When we say we're going to do something, they know we're going to do it. We can expand more profitably off of that foundation than I can go send somebody out to find the brand new firm that I've never talked to before. You do need to do both. You need to develop new relationships, but I think the highest and best use of senior, well-trained BD talent is to figure out how to optimize the relationships you already have and grow the brand that way, rather than, you know, just go down for dollars and see if you can turf up a new source that your firm has never heard of.
That's interesting, because this is making me also think about what is the definition of a good relationship? What does a relationship mean? And I ask that because over the past 4 years, when we've really stepped up our content on LinkedIn, I might go 2 years having never met a person. And then, you know, when we had that first encounter at like a ACG event or whatever it is, they said, hey, I've been following your story for the past couple of years. I really dig it. Some flavor of that. So the quality of that relationship is no longer cold, but it's warm. And it just makes me think about the value of marketing to complement the BD efforts, and also rethinking what a relationship is and how that is built, how that is maintained. And maybe it's for those tier twos or tier threes, the way that you effectively cover that from a BD strategy perspective or from junior resources is by doing those types of touches to complement the one-to-one meetings. So the segmented email, the LinkedIn post, the types of video, the podcast that you're on, they still feel like they're developing a relationship, like they know who you are through those means.
I mean, I look at it and like think about different types of marketing, like a brochure. Like what happens in a brochure? It's a one-way communication, and nobody uses brochures anymore. But if I were to, and when I first started out, we spent a lot of time, what is our little folder, and it had deal announcements in it, and what was it? And we tried to, create these words that probably no one ever read that said, here's why you should trust us. And that's like, when you think about the purpose of that versus the relationship you and I have developed over the last month. At the beginning of this call, we figured out we both have a connection in North Carolina. I understand more about your business. I understand that you have a family business like the family business that I grew up in. I understand you have little kids and you're trying to think of ways to teach them about business. You understand that I have college age kids. And as you build that relationship, and I get to start thinking about you not as a service provider, and you're not thinking of me as one of 10,000 private equity firms in the country. We now have a relationship. I know a little bit about what keeps you up at night and the things you're trying to solve, and vice versa. That to me is that is the seedlings of what becomes a profitable business relationship later, is me understanding your world and you understanding my world, which doesn't happen in a brochure. And I think, it's a convoluted way of getting there, but
I think that in a memorable way, so that because you're doing so much that level of depth on your calls, on your Zoom meetings, but there has to be something memorable. So like, oh, you're the person who has this, or, you're the pilot who now works at this firm. Something that, because when you're having all these relationships, how do you stick out over time?
My answer to that is really good ears. That there's nothing I'm going to say especially in the craziest year ever, that is going to be able to get implanted on your brain. You meet too many people. There's just too many things happening. What you will remember is meeting someone who actually listens to you and actually cares about what's going on in your world. I think there was a great study, and I've been trying to find it. I read it was like a thesis paper or something that I read. It must have been 20 years ago, but they actually did an analysis of what made people enjoy a social gathering. And they tested the music, the other guests, and they did all these experiments where they actually brought in like Nobel laureates at the party. And at the end of the study, so good food, a lot of cocktails, no cocktails. What was it? The people that enjoyed the party the most were the people who met someone who they felt was interested in what they had to say. And I think that is one of the truest things that's ever been said. And I think it's true in business development, is if I can figure out how to understand what makes you tick and how to actually listen to you and hear you and understand you, that is my best chance of getting remembered. And that is also my best chance of building a profitable business relationship.
So let's kind of go along that same thread and talk about people interviewing for BD positions. In all the people that you've interviewed, have the ones that stuck out kind of flipped the script and not gone into their personal sales mode, but gone into just like, hey, here's how I would approach this, and make it into a discussion and asking about the firm? Or what is that balance between them selling themselves, their creds, versus the other approach of just asking you a million questions, like, how do you guys do this? How do you guys segment your CRM? And then kind of going into that type of discussion.
I feel like I've come full circle on this, in that I think the best interviews are the ones that you don't even know are interviews. As soon as somebody starts selling, I don't know about you, but I'm kind of shutting down. I am coming up with my canned answers of why we're not looking for anybody right now. And when you just meet someone who says, hey, I've been in real estate forever. And I think real estate is really similar to private equity. And I would just be curious in your perspective on that. And we have a fascinating conversation around like 2 and 20. It's very similar. You could parallel the roles in real estate developer and deal team all the way down to the analyst role. And our worlds are exactly the same, except they say cap rate and we say multiple. And that's a fascinating conversation. And at the end of that, I'm like, man, you would be great in this field. And as soon as somebody comes at me with like, hey, let me read you my resume, I'm not trying to be, but I'm in shutdown mode, because I've had that conversation 50,000 times. And I think the really interesting interviews are the ones that don't feel at all like interviews.
And that applies, I think, also in speaking with sellers.
100%. As soon as, and it is so interesting to do. And I what's the show? The Bachelor or the Bachelorette.
Oh, so I got to plug in my computer is dying. Okay, so you're saying the Bachelorette.
And I'm not going to live long enough to invest in a season of that again, because it is mind numbing. But the final episode, when you watch, and I don't even know if they still do it this way, but in the first 3 seconds, when either the guy or the girl starts talking, what's going to happen. When you hear that, you're really nice, but really like you, but. And it is exactly the same thing when you're talking to sellers, when you're talking to the winning investment bank for the pitch. The science of that moment is the only reason that I will sit down and watch the last episode of the season. Is because I think that moment is a lot of what happens. And I think the selling of that, as soon as somebody starts selling too hard, it's over.
When, you look at where you are at now and all the years and years of refining your craft, who do you think has really influenced you in you now becoming an expert in this profession?
Everybody that ever took the time to talk to me. Obviously we talked about Glen Oaken, coming right out of North Carolina, doing a couple years investment banking, and then getting to work alongside Glenn. He's got to be number one. And we've talked about these before, just he treated everybody the same. He's your friend first. And he just builds relationships based on genuine affection and friendship. And hugely impactful. Erskine Bowles was tremendously impactful. That was actually my first job out of Carolina, was working for Bowles Hallwell Connor in Charlotte, North Carolina. I think really one of the first mid-market, non-Wall Street boutiques. They built an unbelievable franchise in the early days of private equity, and seeing Erskine's passion for North Carolina, passion for small businesses, and just unbelievable expertise. That was really powerful to see.
What do you think was unique about Erskine, if there were one or two things?
There's not only one or two things. He's one of a kind and just an awesome human being. And go lose yourself on the internet for a couple hours on his Wikipedia page. as somebody who is, again, passionate for small business, passionate for the country. And he has done, his work with Alan Simpson on taking on the impossible projects that he's tried to take on for the benefit of everybody else. His phrase was always, make sure you are taking time to contribute to the community woodpile. He did that more than just about anybody I've ever known.
Does that mean, so I think that concept everyone gets in terms of impact and community, but what does that mean to you in terms of how you live your month to month? For example, do you have like an impact goal for the community on saying, I'm going to spend X amount of hours volunteering or X amount of dollars on this particular cause? Like, how do you think about impact in your life?
My wife and I, we've been involved in a bunch of neat charities and causes. Village Partners International, their work in Uganda, and all of those causes are really fun and really important. And I've kind of come around to the point that, again, back to our conversation around focus, is I'm trying to have an impact. I'm trying to have an impact on the middle market. I am super passionate about the middle market. And as I step back and look at, when I sort of thought, like, what could I do to help the most people? And what I've sort of realized is if I can figure out how to be high character in the way that I'm doing this job, if I can be a great partner for these small businesses, if I can help a family-owned business raise some institutional capital, hopefully those businesses are going to have a better chance of succeeding and growing, and it's going to create great careers, and it's going to allow all those employees and partners and management team members to succeed and be prosperous. That's how I can have the most impact on the world. And maybe there will come a point when I say, like, I want to do something completely different, and I want to go full time into one of these other charitable causes. But right now, it has been a lot of fun to say, I think I can help the world most by being a really good, high character, high integrity investor in small businesses. If there's one thing that can get me on my soapbox and get me really PO'd, is people that want to come down on private capital. It's like this evil robber baron, raider mentality. And I think one of the most American things that you can do is invest in a small business and help that business grow. And I think the long arm of doing that well is where I think I can have the most impact on things like education, on mentoring young people, on helping challenged and impoverished communities become more successful, is to help those businesses. And I'm super proud of it.
When you look back at the 20 plus years and all the businesses that you've invested in with the firms, is there a particular story that kind of sticks out and you realize, like, oh my God, like, this is why I do this. Like, this is why I love doing this.
Like all of them.
I'm not asking you to choose between your babies here, but didn't know if there's a.
And I'm trying to remember specifically, but the cases where, and there was one CFO, and we sort of had the celebration closing dinner, and it was a great deal. And the CFO, when we hung around at the bar afterwards and had one more drink while we were waiting on a car, and he got out a piece of jewelry that he bought for his wife, and he just shared that, he shared a bunch of background about his family and how meaningful it was to be able to do that, and it humanized, why we do what we do. and have had guys write notes about things they got involved with in the next chapter of their career, um, or sharing stories that they'd moved on and their number two had stepped into the leadership role at the company. Um, that's why we do it. And to see there's a guy that's written the book, Adam Coffey, was one of, and it's a great book around just sort of an overview of the private equity experience. Really fun to read his book, and sort of hear about his life story told through his lens. That's just fascinating. And for me, the biggest thing are the continuing friendships. Some North Carolina guys who did a concrete deal in Raleigh years ago. I think it was the 10th platform deal out of a couple hundred now that have been done at Audax. And the partners in that business, the original owners in that business, are still great friends. To me, that's that's a deal done well, is when the friendships outlive the life of the deal.
The point about impact, I think superficially we could think, oh God, it's BS. Like, my job is where I impact, but actually, no. I was thinking through my experience in the past 2 years with this, and I was like, okay, I'm just, doing LinkedIn stories and video for people in private equity and making them look cool. But then I realized, like, after like the first 3 months, is like, what we're actually doing is creating stories that form deep relationships and allow people to see the full self. And then at that moment, there was this one post that we did, and it was for Lauren Mulholland at Middle Ground, and just kind of talking about how they celebrate, they had a deal closing and a fund closing. And then to see the comments in that and other people sharing their stories about how they celebrate a deal closing, I don't know what it was about that specific post, but it just made me realize, like, this is where I can have impact. Like, this is where I can create meaning between people in this community that I've been a part of for 10 years. And that was the aha moment, that it gave so much more depth. And then over the past 18 months, just, this is what, vlog number 45 or something like that we've done. And then I just realized, like, it's okay that I can have an impact and define it within this industry, as opposed to, the veteran nonprofit and that stuff that I work. Like, this stuff can be equally meaningful, and it just took 2 years to realize that.
And I go back and there's a couple of different volunteer boards that I've been involved with, and what I found was that if you really want to have impact, it is hard to do it on a part-time basis. You got to figure out how to really throw yourself into something, and I think we've got 100 million stories about things that we half-assed. Just because of all the distraction and the ADD world that we live in. And the stuff that you're most proud of is the stuff that you figured out how to hyper focus on. And you can be on a volunteer board and figure out with 40% of your time how to hyper focus on that and really make a difference. And obviously that's impact. And I think I've sort of figured out in my own limitations that I just don't have that much range. And if I really, there's 35 awesome people at Plexus, and every single one of those people deserves 100% of my time and focus and energy. And I'm not looking for other things. There is more than, to do this right in one of the most competitive fields that there is. It takes everything I got. I can't do this part-time. And I would say the same thing of the companies we invest in. I don't think I can look at a CEO and not tell them I am 100% aligned with you and on board with you and doing everything in my power to give you the tools and the capital you need to succeed. I guess I'm long-winded way of saying I'm in a zone where it's more focus on less things to have an impact. And I'll go back and reiterate the point that I think investing in small companies is worthy and noble, and it makes a difference in our economy, in our country, and and it has really long tail if you do it right.
Sounds like so much of your life is, you seem very intentional and very thoughtful and intentional. So what do you think are some of the best choices that you have made in your life?
Um, Way outkicked my coverage when I got married. The partnership that I have with my wife is everything, and foundational. And I, when I talk about the focus, I have this mental image of on the home front, I literally sit on Janice's shoulders. The foundational stuff that she does that allows me to go travel and try to help build Plexus and do these deals is only made possible by her doing the same thing in raising our children and creating our home and our community involvement, all that kind of stuff. So that's number one.
How do you think that you have, go ahead. I'll come back to this point.
A preacher and a wonderful friend, the guy who married us in Tampa, shared something with me. He said, focus the same energy and intentionality on your marriage that you do on everything else. And I kind of looked at him quizzically, and he's like, said, you get an annual checkup on your dog, your HVAC system, your car, your teeth. He said, think about the areas in your life where you get professional help on a regular basis because you're not an idiot, and like, are you putting at least that much energy and resources and thought into making sure that your marriage is solid? And that was a great point for a young man to hear. We may have only been a year married at that point. And to this day, that guy has the best marriage that I've ever seen. And it was awesome for me to hear that he put that much energy and professional help into making it even better, and not getting complacent in that. That's, that listening to that advice is probably one of the best things, the most important things I've ever done.
That's awesome. What are some of the big differences between like the husband that you are today versus when you were, when your kids were, under 5? And basically I'm asking for some free advice for a father of a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old. Like what are some things that I just need to keep in mind, because it feels very chaotic around here. And it feels like the last thing we're thinking about is our marriage. And it's like, okay, kids alive, healthy, good. Business, are we going to pay the bills? Oh, by the way, we haven't had a date night in how many quarters?
And we're getting in danger. I'm really trusting in your editing ability on all this stuff that you're getting out of me, because you can cobble this together. And I wish I'd been better at this more consistently. But the point that you just made, and I think a lot of people early on in their career tend to take the attitude of you walk through the door and the little kids are getting ready to go to bed, and it's like, give the wife a peck on the cheek, and then you take the remaining energy that you have from an exhausting day and you get on the floor and you're playing Legos and you're laughing and you put all of that energy on the kids, and then you give your spouse the leftover after the kids go to bed. And that is backwards. And I think if you could find a way to walk in the door or return from the business trip and take a knee with the kids, say, kids, I love you guys. I really want to play with you, but I need 10 minutes with mommy, and we're going to sit right here on the couch, and I need you guys to be quiet and play. And I just want to focus on mommy because she is my partner and she is the most important thing. And I think, if I could redo a lot of my life, it would be to do that a lot more consistently. And I bet if you did that 5 days in a row, and you would see the smiles on your faces as they look at you and your wife connecting, just sitting there on the couch talking. And there was a guy, we did it through our church, but he called it couch time. Of do your couch time in front of your kids so that they know how solid that relationship is. I don't think there's anything better that you could do as a dad. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of coming in and saying, oh, I have to focus on the kids before they go to bed. I have to let them know that they're important. And the most important thing would be show them how important mom is. And I think you'd raise healthier, better adjusted kids that will themselves turn into be, better partners and spouses down the road.
That's a really good reminder. And we started and stopped this practice where during the day in the past 9 months during COVID, we would spend like 30 minutes at noon just walking around the block together or whatever that is. But I think we need to get back to that of being intentional about blocking off. Like, why is it that the best hours during the best days, most days of the week, are spent away or not focused on the people we care most about?
Right.
And so it's not that you have to spend 8 hours, 9 a.m. to noon with your wife or your partner, but it's finding that 30-minute block when you have really good energy. That might be at 11 a.m. and just saying it is part of my business. It is part of my day-to-day routine, especially during quarantine. We're not traveling. Like this is part of us. You're not getting the leftovers at 7:30 when our face is in the plate after dinner and the kids are asleep.
I think you're right on. And I would say, and the one thing I might suggest is don't walk around the block because the kids can't see you do it. Like really genuinely think about it. You said the kids are 1 and 4?
Yeah.
Is do couch time in a way where the kids can see you do it. And I bet the impact from that, and keep a journal. And I bet you will see less bickering among the kids, better behavior, but just call it couch time. And I love your idea of doing it at a high energy time of day. And the first time you do it, the kids are going to jump up on the couch because they're going to want to be a part of it. And just in a gentle way, take them, put them back on the floor. Like, no, this is mommy and daddy time, and let them watch. And you're not ignoring them, but have them watch you focus on each other. And if there is a single better parenting practice in the world, I love that. Convince me otherwise.
I love that. It's another thing that we have been doing is this annual review in our marriage. And we write down, okay, last year you said this was important to me, and the other way around. Yeah. Like, for example, during 2016 and 2017, I was MIA with starting Debt Maven. I was just gone. Yeah. And handed off the responsibilities to her, who, by the way, is a full-time lawyer, and my in-laws from China who were taking care of them. And I was just gone. And it was completely the wrong thing to do. And so and she gave me that feedback in our annual review. She's like, "You're never home for dinner." And then the next year I did. But then we had that feedback or that regular checkup, like you're saying, like you check your teeth, you check your car, but do we check your marriage and be open and honest on a regular scheduled basis? And that was really eye-opening because I learned, and it's honestly a list of 99 things about me and what I need to do.
Yeah.
But that was another practice that we've really tried to get more regular with. And it's really been insightful on how we can be better partners and balanced. We got to schedule like a part 2 or part 3. There are so many questions I'd written down we didn't even cover, but this has been absolutely fantastic. Like, I can't thank you enough for taking the time for this.
Oh, listen, man, love talking about it. We did some weird places, some non-equity places. So be careful in the editing. I don't want to come across as like preachy. I certainly don't know the answer.
Oh no, this is unedited.
And a lot of it is, what I'm trying to do versus what I've successfully done. But it's fun to talk about it and to hear your thoughts on it as well. You're thinking about all the right stuff, and it's fun to imagine back in the days when the kids were 1 and 4, because I was there as well. It seems like a million years ago.
It's gonna be a long journey. Hopefully 2021 will be better. Even though like this year has literally been the most fulfilling and happiest year of my personal or family's life. Because I mean, for a long list of reasons, it has not been financial. It is in,
Yeah.
it started off super rough, like didn't know if the business was going to survive kind of track. And then just everything, we just realized like, this is why we live. Like, this has been an amazing year.
I'm fundamentally an optimist, and I was just looking back on notes and how much hand wringing my generation did, looking at my kids like, wow, you guys are lost in your social media, blah blah blah. You're like, and I feel like the silver lining of 2020 is it reminded us all how precious actual human interaction is, and I think it is. I think it's going to change the way we interact. I hope it's going to change the way we interact with each other when we can get back together in a really positive, way. Take away some of the distraction and remind us what the focus is. So I think we will be talking about 2020 for a really long time, and I hope we'll continue to dwell on the positives of it.